My guest today is OBi Emelonye, a writer and director. He started writing in 1988 whilst he was in college, and he directed his first film in 1989.
I started with a film called Damn Good Friends in 1988, and then I went to Nigeria and spent 2 years in the fledgling Nollywood film industry at the time. I shot about between 5 and 8 films in that time. And then when I felt disgruntled by the business climate in Nigeria, I came back, and I then felt that the way forward for somebody like me who's trained and lives in the diaspora would be to raise the stakes of the production, not do exactly what they're doing back home, but to come on a level that, you know, that is international. And I started gradually in doing that, progressively, with Echoes of War, which gave me a lot of presence in the media and won me 1 or 2 awards. And I've kind of progressed to where I am today, which is the production of The Mirror Boy, which is an international production that was shot in the Gambia, your beautiful Gambia. And it was a hugely successful production in terms of the shoot itself, and what we've, based on the feedback we've got from the trailer that's online, it is also very, there's a lot of international interest in the project, and I'm happy that it is such.
Did you face obstacles that were particular to you as an African?
Oh, it goes without saying. The color of your skin is what makes us who we are. At the same time, it has problems for us, especially in the UK, where even though the prejudices and the problems with racism are on the decline, but pioneers in every sector would experience it the most. You know, now the doors are open and you can screen films at Odeon Cinema. It never used to happen. My film was one of the first to have an independent commercial run in the UK, and it took me, that was Echoes of War. It took an old man who said if this was the last thing he did before he died, he would get the film to the cinema, because he attended the premiere that we had and he saw how people reacted to it, and he said, look, I'm going to get this film to the cinema, and he did. So you have that battle to kind of reinforce who you are, trying to convince people that you are good enough, and it's something that I'm sorry to say that our white brothers and cousins don't have that problem, because they are judged on their work. You are judged, both your surname alone, your name alone conjures up images in people's minds, and they have their guards up even before. Then you have an accent like we do, and you're in trouble. But it shouldn't really stop anybody, because it didn't stop Obama. It didn't, to become the president of America at the time that nobody expected it. So it's about, you know, facing those challenges, working extra hard, remaining focused, remaining confident, believing in yourself, believing in God, and knowing that if this is what you're called to do, it will come to pass.
Are there opportunities for Africans based in the UK to strengthen the position of Africa?
As somebody who's lived in the UK for 17 years, terrible. Jesus, I need to go home. As somebody who lived in the UK for 17 years, my answer to that is there are more opportunities in Africa than there are here. But for some of us who've started here, who cannot just up one morning and go back to Africa, we need to be successful here to be successful back home. So, you know, if you're a nobody here and you go back home, you'll still be a nobody. So here has become like our cross, and we have to carry it very well. There are opportunities. The opportunities are not as much as people back home think they are. They are few and far between, and you have to work extra hard here to get those opportunities, to exploit them. In my area, I mentioned the UK Film Council. I have a few friends who've received funding from them to make films, short films, and stuff like that, and theatre release of an African film. When I say an African film, I don't mean Africa United, that's, you know, an English film shot by an English guy with some African peasants. No, I mean an authentic, quintessential African production by Africans, for Africans, with Africans. If you look at the number of Africans in the UK, if 10% of Africans in the UK went to the cinema to see a film, it will be #1. So the opportunity lies there. The opportunities are there, but we as Africans need to encourage ourselves, need to support each other, need to go out in the rain, in the snow, in the cold, and support one another. That way, we'll create an industry, and once the powers that be, Hollywood, I'm not talking about Pinewood, it doesn't exist here. Hollywood notices that there's this market that's just been opened up, they get interested, and that's when the big money comes in. But for the time being, we need to help ourselves. That self-help comes from finding the money, collaborating with other people to make a production of quality, and also galvanizing the whole of the African community to go out and support it. Because if they go to the cinema, if the Africans turn up at the cinema and they have full houses every day, another African film comes out, Odeon Cinema and the like of the cinema chains will say, oh, bring it on. And once we start making the kind of money that Hollywood makes, it would now affect the quality, it would now affect the lives of Africans in this sector of work, and even beyond, because the effect of Nollywood, as an example, can be felt across the whole country, not just in the places that make films, but the industries that are generated, the ventures that are generated from people selling the tapes, from people duplicating, from, you know, there's a kind of auxiliary industries attached to film industries. And once the film industry starts going, you find that people who are even lawyers would have more jobs, because there will be more contracts for them to write and more lawsuits for them to look after. So it's once we get going and work as one, it's very difficult, but Africa needs to come together as one. Not politically, at least economically, socio-economically, and we'll stand up and be counted.
To follow on from your last comment, what do you think the problem is? Do Africans just not support each other, or do we just not go to the movies?
I think it's multiple fold. It's not something. It's not a question that you answer in one straight answer. Okay, a friend of mine was running Odeon Cinema in Streatham, and the statistics they had was that Africans in the area of Streatham constitute about 25% of the population in that area. However, in coming to the cinema, based on the cinema records, they only represented 5% of people that came to the cinema. So another 20% has gone walkies. It's a cultural thing. Most Africans' idea of recreation or of having fun is to go to a restaurant. It's a cultural thing. They go for a drink, they go and eat, or they go to the nightclub. The cinema is, even though I grew up on Indian films in Nigeria, I'm sorry to say, I'm sorry, but that's the reality. I grew up on Indian films, and in that time, I would beg my mom for money to go watch Indian films, because it was fun. As far as I was concerned then, it was the best thing to do. But as you grew up, the issue, I'm talking about Nigeria now, issues surrounding security in those areas, and the times you go out and you probably come back and you're robbed along the way, or you shot along the way, gradually killed off the cinema culture. So that people now, which is why when home videos came on board, it was great, because you could stay in the comfort of your home and watch it. And to an extent, we've been spoiled by that home video thing, because it was like an inverted progression of cinema. Instead of starting from the cinema and going to home videos, we start from home videos and now we're going to the cinema. So it's much difficult to lure people out of their homes to go and watch these things. But what we try to do with films that we've made in the past, in about 2004, I formed a company called Film Africa. And the idea was to make films and also distribute other people's films in cinemas to kind of kickstart a cinema culture. And we felt that the only way to do that, if you just put a film, no matter how good it is, in the cinema for Africans to go and watch, they will go to their jobs, come home tired, and say, sorry, when it comes out on video, I'll watch it. But if you now made it an event, so we had a premiere roadshow for a film we did in 2005 called The London Successor. We had a premiere roadshow. We had Stephanie Okereke, who was in the film, Dakore Ebuso, who was in the film, Olu Jacobs, who was in the film, and some of the London stars, and we went from Odeon Lee Valley to Odeon Streatham to Odeon Surrey Quays, and then to Odeon Swiss Cottage every Friday, Saturday, Friday for 2 weeks. That's what we did. And you found that the venue sold out because the stars were there. But it wasn't a commercial venture because you had to keep the stars in a hotel, you had to feed them, you had to pay them. So it was more like sensitizing people, please come out and watch. And we continued to do it with the next film that we made called Lucky Joe. We had a premiere road show in Odeon Streatham and Odeon Surrey Quays. It was sold out because, again, the stars were there. And following that, Odeon was convinced to now give us a cinema run. But when it started running during the day, people would not turn up. On the weekends, sometimes they would turn up. So it's something that will change with time. But for the moment, it's something, a decision we have to make individually. Now that the quality of our films is coming up to a certain level, we have to support. We have to come out. And I can assure you, most of the films you see in the cinema now are worth the money. You know, and you use it as an interaction, you use it as going out, you use it as fun. But we have to go. For the time being, it's a problem because it's culturally we don't do that. Jamaicans will do that culturally. The whites will do that culturally, but we will go to the restaurants. But I think it's time that we change that.
How do Africans stay relevant and succeed in this fast-moving, information-based economy? The
place of Africa in the scheme of things have kind of taken a different dimension since Obama became president. A bit before then, actually. There has been this focus on Africa to bring forth the next level, the next dimension in world business, in IT and stuff like that. And in some way, it hasn't happened yet. Mainly not because we don't have the manpower, not because we don't have the brain power, but mainly because of the prejudices we have to face and the problems that we have in our individual countries with corruption and bad leadership and the like. But just like Africans have shown on Facebook, where you find an explosion of interests from little villages with one internet cafe to big towns, the number of Africans on Facebook and the way it has been manipulated as a not just a social networking site, but also as a business site. I exploit the Facebook as a business tool because you make friends, you have a group of people that you can reach with one email, and it's phenomenal. So as it has shown with Facebook and other inventions like believe it or not, it was an African that started using music as a ringtone. Alexander Amosu. With things like that, you find it gives you a bit of hope that actually we know what we're doing. We don't know what's happening to us, but we're sure of what we're doing. So Africans in the UK particularly have to just continue to work hard, have to continue to dream, because the day you stop dreaming and go back to the day job, that day you stop living. You're waiting for your pension. And we didn't come here to get a pension. We came here to better ourselves. And bettering ourselves means wrenching from the UK and from the Western world what they took from us. However they do it, I'm not going to ascribe to more fraudulent ways of doing it, but I feel that with hard work and with persistence, that we'll take back what is ours. And what is ours is a good life, and that good life cannot be obtained by going to work at 5 and coming to work at 9 and coming back at 5. You find a lot of African entrepreneurs, people starting up barber shops, people starting up grocery shops, people starting up boutiques. That is the way. If we subjugate ourselves to the menial jobs and remain where they want us to be, we're not going to go anywhere. We have to bite the bullet, take the bull by the horn, and dare to dream. I'm daring to dream. It hasn't been easy, but I can tell you, I am happier than if I was making £1 million from an employed job. I'm happy with my lot, and I still have hope, and hope keeps you alive.
There's a lot of talk about immigration in the media recently. How do you think this debate affects Africans?
If the UK government wants to, well, the Western governments want to end the issues and problems with immigration and overstayers and illegal immigrants and stuff like that. Let them offer to pay people a substantial amount of money to go back to their countries, and they will go. I know, because you, by the time you spend a year and a half in the UK or 2 years, you think people back home are standing still waiting for you. My classmates are directors of banks. They are editors in chief of newspaper houses. They are progressing. You know, it might be slower, but they are progressing. But you find that you come here and it takes you 5 years to settle in terms of your papers, and then you start a life. By the time 10 years comes, you've only just started, and by the time you look at it, you're in your 40s. So if the UK government wants to end everything about illegal immigration and stuff, let them close up the borders, shut up the borders, pay people a reasonable amount of money to go back to their countries, and I know every friend of mine, legal or illegal, would want to go, because it is at that point where the West has nothing more to offer us. The good life that we all dreamt of to come here doesn't exist. And even if it exists at a price we're not very willing to pay. So the opportunities are more back home. But people that have already come here have a problem of not having roots back home, or not having the kind of contacts they need to survive back home. But by the same token, they don't have anything here. So it's about being caught between the devil and the deep sea. And those who take the risk and go back home, it might take them a few months, years to settle. But once they settle and they use the same kind of skill and the same kind of drive that they used to survive in the UK, apply it back home, they fly. So immigration is going to be reversed very soon. The way the world is going, in the next generation or so, people from the West will be coming to Africa to marry our children in order to have African citizenship.
Amen. How better can Africans contribute to the development of the UK?
Africans have been contributing to the development of the UK from time, even before we even knew about it. From the time that the British landed on our shores and started taking whatever they could understand and destroying what they couldn't understand, we've been contributing. And now that this brain drain started in Africa, and you find a lot of the young, energetic, educated Africans abandoning Africa and seeking greener pastures in the UK, and in the process taking what would have been the base for developing Africa and bringing it to the UK in a society that has no appreciation of that contribution and almost exploits the desperation of these Africans, myself included, in the process. So the brain drain has denied Africa the opportunity to develop. By the same time, the same people that would have developed Africa have come here, have been underutilized, because the society has no appreciation of the skills, or even if they do, they pretend that the skills that these people bring are not relevant. So the contribution of Africans in developing the UK is consistent. You find Africans in the parliament. You find Africans in every walk of life. Medical doctors. A friend of the family came to the UK for medical treatment, and every doctor he saw was a Nigerian. And he's saying, so why aren't we like that back home? It's just that the infrastructure and the enabling environment is not there back home. That's why these people come here and have to work odd jobs to get qualified. And once they get qualified, they don't want to be wrenched away from the good life that they found back home. So they continue to be here, and they wake up one morning. There's something I have to say. A friend of mine calls it the trunk box mentality. Africans living in the UK always say, we're going home. So they buy things and put it in a trunk box. But they never go, because the kids come along And they say, you know what, let's wait for the kids to finish secondary school and then we'll go. And then the kids finish secondary school, say, then you know what, let's wait for them to come out of university, then we go. As soon as the kids come out of university, they find that they advanced in age and they feel that the Medicare back home will not sustain them, so they need the Medicare here. So that trunk box remains there. So they never go. They don't put down roots here because they want to go, and they have no roots back home because they never come home. So you find a lot of Africans lost in that, how do I call it, in that twilight zone of caught between two worlds. Am I going home? Am I staying here? And in spite of that problem of dislocation, they still contribute. They still work very hard. They still pay their taxes. They still contribute in many social aspects. You know, a lot of the care workers in the NHS are Africans. Before the Eastern Europeans influx, Africans maintained the building trade more or less in the UK because they saw value in the pittance that was paid manual work. But the Eastern Europeans have come, and that dynamics has changed a little bit. But the contribution of Africans in the UK is ongoing and will continue to happen, irrespective of what the immigration policy becomes. Now the Conservatives are in power. They have a history of being very hardlined with immigration, and they're going to come down heavy on people. But even with that, people that have settled, people that have put down roots, like you and I, would still make an impact. If I make a film and it gets nominated for an Oscar, they would not remember that I'm a Nigerian. They will say, the British filmmaker, the London-trained British filmmaker has won an Oscar. I'll become British. So just like the athletes that are representing the UK are mainly black from Africa, and they continue to do that. So Africa should hold their heads up high and say, we are part of this society, we've contributed and we continue to contribute, and we should be counted, because without us, they'll feel the absence, they'll feel a void.
Yeah. And finally, what would be your advice to aspiring Africans in the UK?
Don't give up. Don't give up, because nothing good comes easy. You know, you aim high, set your targets very high, reach for the stars, do your very best, keep working at it. The longer you wait for something to come, the more likely it is to come, especially if you stick at it. So, in one sentence, don't give up.